The communication room aboard the human diplomatic vessel fell silent when the emergency broadcast came through. Tai Yang, the human ambassador to the Galactic Council, stared at the holographic display showing the desperate faces of the Quellan defenders. Their crystalline bodies flickered with distress signals, each pulse a silent scream for help. Commander Gina stood beside him, her arms crossed as she watched the footage. The Quellans were a peaceful species. They had welcomed humanity into the Galactic Council only 2 years ago. Now they were dying, and their message was clear. They needed help, and they needed it fast. The Vrex swarm had hit them 3 days ago. No one expected it. The insectoid warriors came from beyond the outer rim, moving through space like locusts. They attacked the Quellan orbital stations without warning. 3 platforms were already destroyed. 4 remained, but they would not last long. Lieutenant Hyun replayed the footage for the 3rd time. He pointed at the screen where Vrex warriors tore through metal barriers like paper. Their claws were sharp enough to cut through advanced alloys. Their numbers seemed endless. Wave after wave crashed against the Quellan defenses. Tai Yang watched a group of Quellan civilians trying to evacuate. The crystalline beings moved slowly, their bodies not built for speed. A Vrex warrior caught one family before they reached the transport. The ambassador closed his eyes and turned away. Gina's jaw tightened. She had served in the Earth Defense Forces for 20 years before taking this diplomatic posting. She knew what real combat looked like. This was not a battle. This was a massacre. The Quellan defense commander appeared on screen. His name was Thex, and his voice carried the harmonic frequency of his species. Despite the translation software, Tai Yang could hear the fear underneath the words. Thex explained their situation carefully. The Vrex had established breeding grounds on 2 of their moons. Every hour, more warriors emerged from the hives. The Quellan forces were exhausted. They had been fighting without rest for 72 hours straight. Then came the request. Thex asked for reinforcements according to standard Galactic Council protocol. He requested 50 soldiers and 1 support frigate. That was the normal amount. That was what the Council procedures recommended for this type of crisis. Hyun blinked in surprise. 50 soldiers? He looked at Gina, then at Tai Yang. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Gina broke the silence first. She asked if the Quellans understood the scope of their situation. Did they know how many Vrex were already on their moons? Did they realize that 50 soldiers would not be enough? Thex responded with patience. He explained that 50 soldiers was a substantial force by Galactic Council standards. Most species sent smaller units for peacekeeping operations. The Prithians sent squads of 20. The Dendari sent specialized teams of 10. 50 was actually quite generous. The commander turned to the ambassador. Her voice was quiet but firm. She told him that humans did not do things the Council way, not when lives were at stake. Taeyang nodded slowly. He understood. He had been born on Earth, had grown up hearing stories of human wars. Humanity's history was written in blood and fire. They had learned hard lessons about half measures and insufficient force. He opened a priority channel to Earth Command. The message was simple. He explained the Quellan situation, transmitted all the tactical data, and requested immediate assistance. He did not specify numbers. Earth Command would know what to send. The response came within an hour. Admiral Day himself appeared on the secure channel. The Admiral was a veteran of the Mars Rebellion and the Titan conflicts. His face was lined with age, but his eyes were sharp. He listened to Taeyang's report without interruption. When the ambassador finished, Dai nodded once. He said the 3rd Legion was already being mobilized. They would arrive at the Quellan system in 48 hours. The transmission ended. Hyun asked what a legion meant in human terms. He was new to military protocol, having served mostly in scientific divisions. Gina smiled, but there was no humor in it. She explained that a legion was not a small force. It was not 50 soldiers or even 500. A full Legion deployment meant 15,000 combat troops, supported by a fleet large enough to carry them across space. The lieutenant's eyes widened. He asked if that was not excessive. The Quellans only asked for 50. The commander shook her head. She told him that humans had a saying. When your friends call for help, you do not send what they think they need. You send what will guarantee they survive. Tai Yang contacted the Galactic Council to inform them of humanity's response. He tried to explain that the human fleet would be somewhat larger than the requested support frigate. He chose his words carefully, not wanting to alarm the council members. The council representatives seemed pleased. They praised humanity's quick response and generous spirit. Some commented that humans were eager to prove themselves in the galactic community. Others noted that enthusiasm was a positive trait, even if sometimes excessive. None of them asked for specifics. None of them questioned what somewhat larger actually meant. Back on the diplomatic vessel, Gina stood at the observation window. She looked out at the stars, toward where the Third Legion would soon travel. She thought about the Vrex swarm, confident in their victory, unaware of what was coming. Hyun joined her at the window. He asked if she thought 15,000 soldiers was really necessary. Maybe they could have sent a smaller force first. Gina did not answer immediately. She remembered battles from her past. She remembered friends who died because reinforcements arrived too late or in numbers too small. She remembered the lesson humanity had learned through centuries of warfare. Finally, she spoke. She told him that humanity had a different philosophy about war. When you commit to helping someone, you commit fully. You do not test the waters. You do not send a small force to see if it works. You send everything you need to win, right from the start. The lieutenant nodded slowly, beginning to understand. In 48 hours, the Vrex swarm would learn what it meant when humans sent reinforcements. In 48 hours, the Galactic Council would understand what humanity's full commitment looked like. The Third Legion was coming, and they were not coming alone. The warning alarm started 2 hours before the human fleet arrived. Quellan sensor operators stared at their displays in confusion. Something was wrong with the readings. The numbers made no sense. Thex, the defense commander, rushed to the sensor station. He asked what they were detecting. The operator's crystalline hands trembled as she pointed at the screen. She said contacts were appearing at the edge of the system. Many contacts, too many. At first, they thought it was the Vrex swarm sending reinforcements, but the signatures were wrong. These were not organic ships grown from living material. These were metal warships with fusion drives burning bright across the darkness of space. The sensor count climbed higher. 10 ships, 20, 50. The number kept rising. When it passed 100, Thex felt his crystalline form pulse with anxiety. When it reached 200, he opened a channel to the human diplomatic vessel. Commander Gina answered immediately. Thex asked if the sensors were malfunctioning. He said they were showing over 200 ships approaching the system. That could not be right. The humans promised to send one support frigate. Gina was quiet for a moment. Then she told him the sensors were working perfectly. The Third Legion had arrived. Captain Sang-hoon commanded the lead dreadnought. The massive warship, named Dokdo after an island back on Earth, led the human formation into Quellan space. Behind him came 11 more dreadnoughts, each one larger than any ship the Quellans had ever built. Sang-hoon sat in his command chair, studying the tactical display. The Vrex positions were clearly marked. 2 moons had been completely infested. Breeding grounds pulsed with activity, spawning new warriors every hour. The remaining Quellan orbital platforms hung in space like wounded animals, their defenses nearly exhausted. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Yuna, provided constant updates. She identified 47 destroyers in formation behind the dreadnoughts. 83 corvettes spread out in screening positions. 200 support vessels carried supplies, ammunition, and additional troops. At the center of the formation, protected by layers of warships, came the fleet carrier Indomitable. The Indomitable was a mobile fortress. It stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hangar bays could hold 500 atmospheric fighters. Its barracks housed the entire 3rd Legion, 15,000 soldiers ready for combat. The carrier had been built for one purpose: to deliver overwhelming force anywhere humanity needed it. Sergeant Junho checked his equipment for the 3rd time. Around him, thousands of other soldiers did the same. They stood in the massive deployment bay, row after row of armored figures. Each soldier wore an exosuit that increased their strength and speed. Each carried enough weapons and ammunition to outfit an entire Quellan platoon. Junho had fought in 3 campaigns before this one. He knew what was coming. The other soldiers knew too. They had trained together for months. They had run simulations of orbital drops and ground combat. Now the time had come to put that training into practice. A young private named Mina stood nearby, nervously adjusting her helmet. This was her first real deployment. She had graduated from basic training only 3 months ago. Junho noticed her anxiety and moved closer. He told her to focus on her breathing. He reminded her of her training. He said she would do fine, that the squad would watch her back. Mina nodded, grateful for the reassurance. The carrier's communication system crackled to life. Captain Sang-hoon's voice filled the deployment bay. He told them the mission was simple. The Vrex had attacked their allies. The Quellans needed help. The 3rd Legion would provide that help. They would eliminate the Vrex threat completely. They would make sure this never happened again. The soldiers responded with a unified shout that echoed through the massive space. They were ready. Thex tried one more time to contact the human fleet. He needed to understand what was happening. When the communication opened, he found himself speaking directly to Captain Sang-hoon. The Quellan commander explained carefully. He appreciated humanity's enthusiasm. He was grateful for their assistance. But surely this many ships was not necessary. The Council had approved 50 soldiers and 1 frigate. This fleet could invade an entire sector. Sang-hoon listened patiently. When Thex finished, the captain explained humanity's position. He said the 3rd Legion did not do partial deployments. When they committed to a mission, they brought everything they needed to guarantee success. Half measures cost lives, and humans did not like losing soldiers. Thex asked what he meant by everything. Sang-hoon smiled, though the Quellan could not see it through the communication channel. The captain told him to watch his sensors, and he would understand. The human fleet moved into attack formation. The dreadnoughts formed a line facing the 2 infested moons. The destroyers broke into smaller groups, each assigned to specific targets. The corvettes spread out in a wide net, ready to intercept any Vrex attempting to escape. On the moons below, the Vrex noticed the new arrivals. Their simple minds registered the ships as potential threats, but they had faced ships before. The Quellans had ships. The Prithians had ships. The Vrex had defeated them all. These new ships would be no different. They were wrong. Admiral Day gave the order from his flagship. His voice was calm, almost casual. He said all batteries were cleared to fire. He told the Marines to prepare for orbital deployment. He wished them good hunting. The human fleet opened fire. Quellan observers on the remaining orbital platforms watched in stunned silence. The dreadnoughts fired their main railguns, massive weapons that accelerated metal slugs to a fraction of light speed. Each shot carried enough kinetic energy to level a city block. The dreadnoughts did not fire once or twice. They fired continuously, their automated systems tracking and eliminating targets as fast as the weapons could cycle. The destroyers added their plasma torpedoes to the bombardment. Explosions bloomed across the moon surfaces like deadly flowers. Vrex defensive positions, carefully dug into the rock over days of work, simply ceased to exist. Entire sections of the breeding grounds vanished in balls of superheated plasma. Lieutenant Yuna coordinated the fire missions with practiced efficiency. She called out targets to each ship. She adjusted firing patterns to maximize coverage. She tracked which areas had been cleared and which still needed attention. Her voice never wavered, never hesitated. The Vrex tried to respond. They launched swarms of warriors into space, hoping to overwhelm the human ships through sheer numbers. It was a tactic that had worked against other species. The corvettes met them with point defense systems. Automated turrets tracked and destroyed the Vrex warriors before they could close within a kilometer of any human ship. Those that somehow survived the defensive fire found themselves targeted by the destroyers. Plasma torpedoes designed to destroy warships made short work of individual warriors. Within 10 minutes of entering the system, the human fleet had eliminated 40% of the Vrex ground forces. Within 20 minutes, that number climbed to 60%. The bombardment did not slow. The humans had ammunition to spare. Sergeant Junho felt the carrier shake as the first wave of drop pods launched. His squad moved to their assigned pod, sealing themselves inside the armored cylinder. Through the small viewport, he could see the moon's surface far below, already scarred by the orbital bombardment. The pod launched with a force that would have crushed an unaugmented human. The exosuits absorbed most of the acceleration, keeping the soldiers conscious and ready. Junho watched the surface rush up to meet them, fire streaming past the viewport as they entered the thin atmosphere. This was it. The Third Legion was going to war. The drop pod hit the ground like a meteor. The impact would have killed an ordinary human, but Sergeant Junho's exosuit absorbed the shock and converted it into energy for his systems. The pod door exploded outward, and he stepped onto the surface of Moon Gamma for the first time. Around him, hundreds of other pods were landing. The sky was full of them, streaking down through the thin atmosphere in waves. Each pod carried a 5-person fire team. Each fire team was a self-contained combat unit capable of fighting independently or as part of the larger force. Junho checked his tactical display. His squad was with him. Corporals Mina and Youngho, and Privates Hyunwoo and Yunji. All 5 had survived the drop without injury. That was a good start. The Vrex were already responding. Through the dust and smoke, Junho could see the insectoid warriors rushing toward the landing zone. They moved fast on their 6 legs, their claws clicking against the rock surface. They had sharp mandibles that could tear through most armor. Their chitinous shells could deflect small arms fire, but the Third Legion did not carry small arms. Junho raised his assault rifle and opened fire. The weapon was called a railgun rifle, a scaled-down version of the massive guns mounted on the dreadnoughts. It fired metal slugs at incredible velocity. The first shot caught a Vrex warrior in the center mass and punched straight through its shell. The warrior fell and did not move again. Around him, his squad was firing as well. Mina had a heavy plasma gun that fired superheated bolts. Each shot that connected melted through Vrex armor like it was butter. Youngho carried a launcher that fired small missiles. Each missile locked onto a target and pursued it until impact. Hyunwoo and Yunji provided covering fire with their rifles. The Vrex charge broke within seconds. The warriors that survived the initial volley turned and fled back into their tunnels. This was not what they expected. Every other species they fought had weaker weapons, slower soldiers, and more cautious tactics. These new warriors were different. These warriors were dangerous. Captain Sang-hoon coordinated the ground assault from orbit. His tactical display showed all 15,000 soldiers and their positions. Green icons marked human units. Red icons marked Vrex positions. Every second, more red icons disappeared from the map. He opened a channel to his battalion commanders. He told them to advance according to the plan. Secure the landing zones first, then push toward the primary Vrex hive. Eliminate all breeding chambers. Leave no survivors who might rebuild. The commanders acknowledged and relayed orders to their units. The Third Legion began to move as one massive force, spreading out across the moon's surface like a tide of armored humanity. Corporal Mina led her fire team through a narrow canyon. Intelligence reported a Vrex tunnel entrance somewhere ahead. Her job was to find it and secure it for demolition. She moved carefully, her sensors scanning for enemy contacts. The tunnel entrance appeared around a bend in the canyon. Two Vrex warriors stood guard at the opening. They saw Mina and her team at the same time the humans saw them. The warriors charged. Mina did not hesitate. She raised her plasma gun and fired twice. Both warriors fell, their shells melted through by the superheated bolts. Her team moved past the bodies and into the tunnel. Inside, the tunnel branched into multiple passages. A Quellan unit would have mapped each passage carefully, checked for traps, and proceeded slowly. Mina had a different approach. She pulled out a demolition charge and armed it. She told her team to fall back to the entrance. She set the timer for 30 seconds and placed the charge at the junction point. Then she ran. The explosion collapsed the entire tunnel system. Rock and debris buried whatever Vrex were inside. Mina marked the location on her tactical map and moved to the next objective. Total time from entering to leaving: 4 minutes. Lieutenant Yuna, still aboard the Docto, monitored the communications channels. She heard hundreds of similar reports coming from the moon surface. Fire teams were finding Vrex positions, eliminating them, and moving on. The speed of the advance surprised even her. She reported to Captain Sang-hoon that the 3rd Legion was ahead of schedule. They had cleared 60% of their assigned sectors in just 2 hours. At this rate, Moon Gamma would be secure by morning. The Vrex tried to adapt. They had survived for centuries by learning from their enemies and changing their tactics. They pulled back from the surface and concentrated their forces in the deep tunnels. They hoped to draw the humans into narrow spaces where numbers would matter more than firepower. Major Sora commanded the 3rd Legion's Recon Division. When the Vrex pulled back underground, she recognized it as a trap. A typical military force would have to follow them slowly, clearing tunnels room by room. That could take weeks. Sora had no intention of following them. She contacted the fleet and requested bunker buster missiles. These were specialized weapons designed to penetrate deep underground before detonating. Each missile could collapse tunnel systems hundreds of meters below the surface. Captain Sang-hoon approved the request immediately. 6 destroyers moved into position over the areas where Vrex tunnels were concentrated. They launched their missiles in coordinated salvos. The missiles hit the surface and kept going. Their hardened tips punched through solid rock like it was foam. Seismic sensors tracked them as they descended. When they reached the proper depth, they detonated. On the surface, soldiers felt the ground shake. Huge sections of rock collapsed as the tunnel systems underneath gave way. Any Vrex caught inside were buried under thousands of tons of stone. Sergeant Junho watched one such collapse from a safe distance. The ground in front of him simply fell away, leaving a massive crater. He shook his head in amazement. The 3rd Legion did not clear obstacles. They removed them entirely. Private Hyun-woo asked if they should check the crater for survivors. Junho told him not to bother. Nothing survived that kind of collapse. They had other objectives to complete. The battle continued through the day and into the night. The humans fought without stopping. Their exosuits provided them with enhanced endurance. They could fight for days without rest if necessary. The Vrex, despite their numbers, began to tire. On Moon Delta, the 2nd infested satellite, the pattern repeated. Human drop pods rained down from orbit. Soldiers cleared the surface with ruthless efficiency. The fleet bombarded any position that offered resistance. Bunker busters collapsed tunnel systems. Within hours, the Vrex forces were scattered and broken. Thex watched the battle from his command post on the surviving orbital platform. He had fought the Vrex for 3 days with his entire defense force. He had lost thousands of soldiers and 3 orbital stations. Now he watched as 15,000 human soldiers accomplished in hours what his people could not do in days. A Quellan officer asked how the humans were doing this. How could they move so fast and hit so hard? What kind of training produced soldiers like these? Thex did not have an answer. He had read the reports about humanity. He knew they came from a world where warfare was common. He had heard they spent centuries fighting each other before reaching the stars. But reading reports was different from seeing the reality. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not probe for weaknesses or test defenses. They identified their objective and moved toward it with absolute determination. Any obstacle in their path was simply destroyed. Any enemy that engaged them was eliminated. There was no hesitation, no doubt, no mercy. Commander Gina stood beside Thex, watching the same displays. The Quellan commander turned to her and asked a simple question. He asked if all human military forces fought this way. Gina considered the question carefully. She told him the 3rd Legion was a standard combat unit by human standards. There were units that were more specialized, more heavily equipped, or more aggressively trained. The Legion was just regular soldiers doing their regular job. Thex's crystalline form flickered with something that might have been fear or respect. He said he was beginning to understand why humanity's application to join the Galactic Council had been approved so quickly. The other species wanted Earth as a friend, not an enemy. Gina smiled but said nothing. She turned back to the tactical display and watched as another section of Moon Gamma was marked as clear. The 3rd Legion was winning, and they were making it look easy. The Vrex Queen felt something she had never experienced before. In her long life, spanning over 2 centuries, she had known only confidence and victory. Her swarms had conquered dozens of worlds. Her warriors had broken armies from a dozen different species, but now, deep in her cavern on Moon Delta, she felt something new and unfamiliar. She felt afraid. The reports from her warriors made no sense. The new enemy moved too fast and hit too hard. They showed no fear. They took no prisoners. Every position her forces held was destroyed within minutes. Every counterattack was met with devastating firepower. In 36 hours, she had lost 80% of her swarm. The Queen sent out desperate commands. She ordered her warriors to fight harder, to hold their positions, to defend the breeding chambers. But the orders meant nothing. The humans simply destroyed anything that resisted. Warriors who held their ground died. Warriors who retreated died slower, but still died. Major Sora studied the tactical map in her command vehicle. Her recon division had tracked the Vrex Queen to a deep cavern system on Moon Delta. Satellite imaging showed multiple tunnel entrances leading to a large underground chamber. The Queen was there, protected by her last few hundred warriors. Standard Galactic Council protocol would be to establish a perimeter and attempt communication. Offer the Queen a chance to surrender. Negotiate terms. The Council believed in minimizing casualties when possible. Sora had different orders. Admiral Day had been very clear. The Vrex swarm was a threat to the entire sector. They had attacked human allies without provocation. They needed to be shown that such actions carried consequences. The Queen could surrender, but only after she understood the price of attacking those under human protection. Sora ordered her forces to surround all tunnel entrances. Then she called for the bunker busters again. The destroyers overhead launched 6 missiles in quick succession. The weapons hit the surface and penetrated deep before detonating. The explosions collapsed the outer tunnels, sealing most of the entrances. Only one remained open, exactly as Sora planned. She sent a simple message down that tunnel in all known Vrex communication frequencies. The Queen had 1 hour to evacuate the system completely. After that, any Vrex presence would be eliminated. Inside the cavern, the Queen received the message. Her warriors clustered around her, waiting for orders. She could fight. She could try to dig new tunnels. She could attempt one final assault. But she knew the truth. This enemy was unlike any she had faced before. This enemy would not stop until she and all her warriors were dead. For the first time in Vrex history, a queen chose retreat over battle. She gathered her remaining warriors and led them through the one open tunnel, up to the surface and toward the few remaining ships capable of leaving the system. Lieutenant Young-ho watched the Vrex emerge from the tunnel. His orders were to let them pass unless they showed aggression. He counted them as they fled. 347 warriors, including the Queen. That was all that remained of a swarm that had numbered over 10,000 just 2 days ago. His squadmate asked if they should stop the Vrex. Young-ho shook his head. He said Major Sora had given them 1 hour to leave. Until that time expired, they were free to go. After that, any who remained would be targets. The Vrex reached their ships and launched into space. They did not look back. They did not send any final messages of defiance. They simply fled, their queen silent and defeated. Captain Sang-hoon received confirmation that the Vrex were leaving the system. He informed Admiral Day, who approved the next phase of the operation. The fleet would ensure the moons were completely cleared of any remaining Vrex presence. Then engineers would help the Quellans rebuild their orbital stations. But first, there was one piece of unfinished business. Sergeant Jun-ho had lost 2 soldiers during the operation. Corporal Min-ho and Private Ji-woo had been caught in a Vrex ambush while securing a landing zone on Moon Gamma. They had held their position long enough for reinforcements to arrive, but both died from their injuries before medical teams could reach them. The 3rd Legion had a tradition. When soldiers fell in combat, their loss was not ignored or forgotten. Every death was answered. Every sacrifice was honored with action, not just words. Jun-ho reported the ambush location to his commanding officer. Within an hour, 3 full companies of soldiers descended on the area. They cleared every tunnel within a 10-kilometer radius. They used bunker busters to collapse any underground chambers. They used plasma bombs to sterilize the surface. When they finished, nothing remained but scorched rock and empty craters. Lieutenant Yuna monitored the operation from orbit. A Quellan observer asked why so much force was necessary. The Vrex in that area were already dead or had fled. Why waste resources destroying empty tunnels? Yuna explained humanity's perspective. She said those tunnels contained Vrex who had killed human soldiers. Those tunnels represented a threat that had cost human lives. By destroying them completely, the 3rd Legion sent a message. Attack humans. And not only will you fail, but everything you built will be erased. The Quellan observer did not fully understand, but he nodded politely. Different species had different ways of honoring their dead. On the 4th Quellan orbital platform, Thex assembled what remained of his defense force. He wanted to thank the humans personally. Commander Gina accepted his invitation and brought a small delegation, including Ambassador Tae-yang. Thex stood before them, his crystalline body reflecting the station lights. He said the Quellans owed humanity a debt they could never fully repay. The humans had saved their civilization. They had driven off an enemy that seemed unstoppable. They had done in 2 days what the Quellans could not do in weeks. Tae-yang accepted the thanks gracefully. He said humanity was honored to help their friends. He said the 3rd Legion was pleased the operation had been successful. He carefully avoided mentioning that this was considered a minor deployment by human standards. Thex asked if the humans would accept any reward. Resources, technology, territory. The Galactic Council would surely approve compensation for such effective assistance. Gina spoke before Tae-yang could answer. She said the 3rd Legion did not fight for rewards. They fought because their allies needed help. She said the only thing humans wanted was assurance that the Quellans were safe and could rebuild. But then she paused and added something else. She said if the Quellans truly wanted to honor the human sacrifice, they could remember 2 names, Corporal Min-ho and Private Ji-woo, the 2 soldiers who gave their lives to protect Quellan civilians. That would be payment enough. Thex agreed immediately. He said those names would be inscribed on a memorial that would stand for generations. Quellan children would learn about the humans who came when called and fought when needed. The meeting ended and the human delegation returned to their ship. As they left, Tae-yang noticed something on the Quellan station. Workers were already constructing the memorial Thex had promised. 2 names were being carved in crystalline stone, written in both Quellan script and human letters. Back on the dock, though, Admiral Day prepared his report for Earth Command. The operation was complete. The Vrex had been driven from the system. Quellan casualties after human arrival, 0. Human casualties, 2. The Third Legion had performed exactly as expected, but Day knew this mission would have larger consequences. Word would spread through the Galactic Council. Other species would hear about what happened when humans sent reinforcements. They would learn that humanity did not believe in half measures. They would understand that asking Earth for help meant receiving more than requested, delivered with overwhelming force. Some species would be frightened by this. Some would be impressed. All would remember. The Vrex would remember most of all. Their queen fled to the outer darkness, her swarm broken. She would spend years rebuilding her forces, but she would never attack the Quellans again. She had learned what the galaxy was slowly discovering. Humanity's friends were under humanity's protection, and that protection came with a promise. Help us, and we will help you 10 times over. Threaten our friends, and you will face forces beyond your imagination. The Third Legion began preparations to leave the system. Their job was done. The Galactic Council chamber was designed to hold representatives from 40 different species. Today, it felt crowded even though only 20 species had sent delegates. Everyone wanted to be present for this emergency session. Everyone wanted to hear what would be said about the humans and their response to the Quellan crisis. Ambassador Tai Yang stood at the center of the chamber, surrounded by the council members. Their seats rose in tiers around him, creating an amphitheater effect. Some species sat in chairs, others floated in containment fields. A few existed as energy patterns or collective consciousnesses. All of them were focused on the human representative. The Prithian counselor spoke first. His species was known for careful deliberation and measured responses. He said the council appreciated humanity's quick action in the Quellan crisis. However, there were concerns about the methods used. The humans had been asked for 50 soldiers. They sent 15,000. This was excessive. The Dendari counselor agreed. Her species valued efficiency and resource management. She pointed out that humanity deployed over 200 ships when 1 frigate was requested. This showed poor planning and wasteful use of military assets. What if another crisis occurred while the Third Legion was deployed? Had Earth considered this? Tai Yang listened to each criticism patiently. He had expected this reaction. The Galactic Council operated on principles of proportional response. When faced with a problem, you sent exactly enough force to solve it, no more and no less. This was considered wise resource management. Humans had a different philosophy, born from centuries of warfare on their home world. They had learned through bitter experience that insufficient force led to prolonged conflicts, higher casualties, and ultimate failure. When committing to any military action, humans believed in sending overwhelming force to guarantee rapid success. A counselor from the Morphid species raised a tentacle. The Morphids were peaceful traders who avoided conflict whenever possible. The counselor said the real concern was not the number of ships or soldiers. The concern was the speed and violence of the human response. The Vrex swarm had been a threat for decades. The humans eliminated them in less than 2 days. Another counselor, a crystalline being from the Prithian colonies, added more context. He said reports from the battlefield showed humans using weapons that seemed designed to maximize destruction. They collapsed entire tunnel systems. They sterilized large areas of moon surface. They pursued fleeing enemies with relentless determination. This level of aggression was disturbing to many council species. Tai Yang remained calm. He understood their concerns, but he also understood they were viewing the situation through their own cultural lenses. These species had enjoyed peace for centuries. They had forgotten what real war looked like. Humans had not forgotten. Commander Gina, standing beside Tai Yang, asked permission to speak. The council approved. She stepped forward and addressed the chamber directly. She said the council members were correct that humans used overwhelming force, but they were missing an important detail. The Quellans lost 3 orbital stations and thousands of civilians before humans arrived. After human forces engaged, Quellan casualties dropped to 0. Not one more civilian died after the 3rd Legion began operations. She continued. The Council criticized human methods as excessive, but what was the alternative? If humans had sent 50 soldiers as requested, the battle would still be ongoing. More Quellans would be dead. The Rex would have time to establish stronger positions. The conflict could drag on for months. Instead, the humans ended it in 2 days. The Rex were broken. The threat was eliminated. The Quellans were safe and already beginning to rebuild. From a human perspective, this was success. A new voice spoke from the council seats. It was Thex, the Quellan defense commander. He had been invited to give testimony about the human response. His crystalline form glowed as he addressed the chamber. Thex said he understood the council's concerns about proportional response. Before the crisis, he would have agreed with them. But he had watched his people die for 3 days while following proper protocols. He had requested the appropriate amount of reinforcements according to council guidelines. Those guidelines would have left his species defenseless. Then the humans arrived, and everything changed. They did not ask for permission to use overwhelming force. They did not debate the proper response level. They simply came, fought, and won. Because of them, Quellan children still had futures. Because of them, his civilization survived. Thex said the council could criticize human methods all they wanted, but he would forever be grateful that humans did not follow those same restrictive protocols. He finished by announcing that the Quellan government was formally requesting a military alliance with Earth. If the council approved or not, the Quellans would pursue this alliance. The chamber fell silent. This was unexpected. Military alliances outside council approval were technically allowed but rarely pursued. The fact that the Quellans were willing to do so spoke volumes about their confidence in humanity. Over the next weeks, similar requests arrived. The Dendari, despite their initial criticism, approached Earth about joint security operations. Pirates had been harassing their trade routes for years. Council peacekeeping forces had limited success. Could humanity assist? Admiral Day read the request and smiled. He authorized the deployment of the Fifth Fleet, 200 ships and associated marine forces. The pirates took one look at the approaching armada and surrendered without firing a shot. The Dendari trade routes became the safest in the sector. The Morphid species faced a different crisis. A plague was spreading through one of their colony worlds. They requested medical support, hoping for perhaps a team of doctors and some supplies. Humanity sent 12 hospital ships, 4,000 doctors, nurses, and medical technicians. Enough medicine and equipment to treat 10 times the affected population. They did not just treat the plague. They established a permanent medical station to prevent future outbreaks. The Morphids were overwhelmed by the response, but grateful. Ambassador Taeyang found himself fielding requests from multiple species every week. Each one started the same way. They would carefully explain their problem. They would politely request modest assistance. Then they would wait nervously for humanity's response. Taeyang would listen, make notes, and send the request to Earth Command. The response was always the same. If humans were committing to help, they would send what was needed to guarantee success, not what the requesting species thought was appropriate. Lieutenant Yuna, now promoted to commander and serving as Taeyang's military liaison, coined a phrase to describe humanity's approach. She called it the human proportionate response. When someone asked for help, humans multiplied the request by 10 to 100 and delivered it with maximum efficiency. The phrase caught on. Soon, species throughout the council were using it. When facing a serious threat, they would joke about needing a human proportionate response. The joke carried respect underneath. Everyone knew what it meant. It meant humans took their commitments seriously. Not everyone appreciated humanity's approach. Some species remained uncomfortable with such overwhelming force. They argued it set a dangerous precedent. What if other species started following human methods? What if the careful balance of power in the council was disrupted? These concerns were valid, and Taiyang acknowledged them in his reports. But he also noted the results. Human interventions were quick, decisive, and successful. Casualties were minimized. Threats were eliminated. Allies were protected. These outcomes spoke for themselves. 6 months after the Quellan crisis, the Galactic Council held another emergency session. This time, the topic was different. They were not criticizing human methods. They were formally recognizing Earth as a Tier 1 military power. This designation was usually reserved for species with centuries of spacefaring experience. Humanity had achieved it in less than 3 years. With the designation came responsibilities. Earth would be expected to maintain peacekeeping forces. They would assist council members facing military threats. They would contribute to sector defense. Admiral Day accepted the responsibilities on behalf of Earth. He promised that humanity would fulfill its obligations to the best of its ability. But he also made clear that humans would continue to operate according to their own military doctrine. If someone asked for help, they would receive a full response, not a minimal one. The Council accepted this condition. They had learned, as the Vrex had learned, that trying to change human nature was pointless. Better to work with humans as they were than to try making them something they were not. Commander Gina stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station, looking out at the stars. Lieutenant Hyun, now Captain Hyun, and commanding his own ship, joined her. He asked if she thought the Council truly understood humanity now. Did they grasp what it meant when humans made commitments? Did they realize that humans would always choose their friends' safety over following proper protocols? Gina considered the question. She said some understood and some did not. But it did not matter. Humanity's actions would speak louder than any explanation. Every time a crisis emerged and humans responded with overwhelming force, the lesson would be reinforced. She said the galaxy was learning something important. When you had humans as allies, you did not need to worry about having enough support. You did not need to calculate minimum force requirements. You simply called for help, and humans would send everything needed to solve the problem. Hyun smiled. He said that was a good reputation to have. Gina agreed. Across the galaxy, the 3rd Legion was already preparing for its next deployment. Another ally needed assistance. Another threat needed to be addressed. The soldiers checked their equipment, ran their simulations, and waited for orders. When those orders came, they would deploy in full. Not because protocol required it, but because that was the human way. When friends called for help, you did not send what they asked for. You sent what they needed to survive and thrive. The Galactic Council had learned to expect this. Some species found it excessive. Others found it reassuring. All of them understood one simple truth. Humanity had joined the galactic community, and the galaxy would never be the same.